Good day, duelists, and welcome to another Duel Masters deck profile, and boy do I have an interesting deck for you today. This is Light Water Darkfire Armorloid Control. It's a list based off a deck a Finnish player named Otto played at the Mega Meet 2025 tournament and managed to get 4th place with it, which for me at least was quite surprising. Armorloids was always a concept that was in the back of my mind, but it's not that easy to take that concept and turn it into a concrete list that actually works. But I'm happy to say that this deck right here does just that, so I'm very excited to share it with you today. So what makes Armorloids conceptually viable? Well, I guess a good place to start with is this card, Simian Warrior Grash. This makes it such whenever one of your Armorloids is destroyed, including itself, you get to burn one of your opponent's mana. And anyone who's played Modern Duel Masters knows just how frustrating mana burn can be. Like if you have a big board of 3 or 4 creatures, normally big boards are vulnerable to removal, like one Blizzard of Spears and it's all gone, but with Grash in play, if your opponent wants to mass remove the board, they need to sacrifice 3 to 4 mana, which is often just not a viable option, so they would first need to deal with Grash and only then wipe the board, which is much harder to set up and requires way more investment. Simian Warrior Grash is really the piece that makes the deck work. And one Armorloid that synergizes with it very well is our old friend all the way from base set, Rotos the Traveler. When Rotos is played, your opponent must choose one of their creatures and destroy it, and then Rotos himself dies, which in itself is not an amazing effect, but add to it a mana burn from Grash when Rotos destroys itself, and suddenly it becomes pretty damn good. It's like a Proclamation of Death and a Mana Crisis all in one card. Yet another piece of the Armorloids puzzle is of course Smash Warrior Stagrandu, and what this does is, first of all, it can attack untapped creatures, and also, while battling a creature with 6000 or more power, Stagrandu's power becomes over 9000! So basically, as long as this stays on the board, your opponent can never play big creatures because they will just die before they can do anything. Which is a decent enough effect, although not amazing because big creatures are not really a significant part of the modern Duel Masters landscape, but what really makes this card shine is Petrova, Channeler of Suns. Petrova can power up all your Armorloids by 4000 and it's untargetable, so it's very difficult to remove from the board. It really gives the deck that extra punch it needs, but back to Stagrandu. With Petrova on board, it becomes a 5000 power creature that while battling 6000 plus, it gets a bajillion power. In other words, it can deal with anything under 5000 and everything over 6000. So unless your opponent is playing La Purification Enforcer for some fucking reason, Stagrandu can take anything off the board. And it can attack untapped creatures, so it pretty much makes it so that your opponent cannot play anything on the board without it being immediately destroyed. And the final Armorloid of the deck is Punch Trooper Bronx. When this enters, you can destroy one creature on the board with the lowest power. This is not only good against aggressive decks as you're killing one of their attackers while developing a body that can fight back, but also control decks tend to play a lot of creatures like Bronze Arm, Skysword, Halkus, etc., and taking away soul swap targets is not nothing. Bronx was not in Otto's original list, and I'm not sure if it's a correct inclusion, but I mean, it's a cool card, and where else are you gonna play it if not an Armagaloid deck? And with the Armorloids out of the way, let's talk about the rest of the deck, starting with the anti-aggro tools. We have 3 Aqua Surfers, pretty much the best card in Duel Masters you can get out of shields, can win games almost by itself if it is hit at the right time. Then we have Aqua Skydiver, which is honestly a deceptively strong card. Having a blocker that keeps coming back can slow down aggro decks quite a lot, and also, quite importantly, it counts as both a water and a light mana, and because we're trying to fit 4 colors into 40 cards, we really need these multi-civs to be able to play all colors reliably. Which leads us perfectly into the next card, Miraculous Snare, one of the best pieces of removal Duel Masters has to offer. It can be played early, which means it's good against fast decks, it puts creature into shields, which is effective against all control decks playing graveyard retrieval. And of course, as mentioned before, you can always charge it to unlock 2 mana colors with 1 card. One neat interaction with Miraculous Snare is that you can use it on your own Aqua Surfers or Skydivers to get some extra shield triggers, which can help stabilize against hyper-aggressive lists. Sure, you're giving an opponent an extra shield, but control decks shouldn't care about that too much, as by the time you're going in for shield, you should ideally already be winning. Then we have yet another shield trigger in good old reliable Terror Pit. Can get rid of anything on the board, no questions asked, no matter how big or small. Simple yet effective, and it can win games if it comes out of shields at the right time. And our final dedicated anti-aggro tool is one copy of Miraculous Meltdown. This has the effect of equalizing shields, so if you're at 0 shields when you cast it, your opponent is also at 0 shields all of a sudden. And since you're playing a creature based deck, you probably have a couple of creatures on the board by the time that happens to end the game. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, it makes for a memorable moment, and also worst come to worst, like we talked about before, you can charge it to unlock 2 colors of mana. And that's about it for the anti-aggro section. Now the thing is, even with all of these tools, this deck can still struggle against rush decks. It's not horrible against them, but it's definitely not favored either. And that is okay, no deck in Duel Masters can be good against everything. Alright, now let's move on to the control section, starting with a spicy inclusion that is Cloned Nightmare. Clone Nightmare discards a number of cards equal to the number of Clone Nightmares in graveyards plus 1. So in general, on your first cast with it would discard 1 card, second cast it would discard 2, and so on. The elephant in the room is why Clone Nightmare instead of something like Cranium Clamp? Well, Clone Nightmare is worse than Cranium Clamp on first cast, but it becomes significantly better from the second cast onward. There's definitely a trade-off to be had there, but the main reason why we end up ditching Cranium Clamp here is that this list already has a lot of 4-drops. You have Grash, Rotus, Bronx. These are the things you want to be doing on turn 4, so in order to keep the 4-slot cost from getting oversaturated, Clone Nightmare just makes way more sense. Also, another option to consider I guess would be Lost Soul, but since we're not running Ramp in this deck, 7 mana is just too much. You're never winning the Lost Soul race here. And speaking about card advantage, Energy Stream is just a solid +1. It's a great recovery tool after having your hand discarded, and it greatly improves your average card quality when in top deck mode. Would honestly play more than 4 if I could, but it is what it is. And finally, let's talk about recovery. Our Armorloids want to be destroyed because of Simian Warrior Grash, so they're gonna end up in the graveyard a lot. And we need a way to get them out of there. In that sense, we're playing 1 copy of Morbid Medicine and 1 Zombie Carnival. Morbid gets 2 creatures out of the graveyard and Zombie Carnival takes 3 creatures, but it costs 1 more mana and they need to be of the same race. These 2 spells, they each have their upsides and downsides, and honestly I'm not sure which of them is better, so I'm just running 1 of each, but feel free to go with different ratios yourself. Onto a different type of great recovery. Fel-Iga Dawn Guardian allows us to fetch spells from there, which can be a Clone Nightmare to hit your opponent with more discard, it could be a Terror Pit if you need to get rid of something scary, or it could even be a Morbid Medicine if you want creatures instead of spells. In general, Fel-Iga and Morbid Medicine have great synergy with one another, as they can both fetch each other, leading to a very scary potential value engine. And of course, we cannot forget about our Mana Zone, for which we have 1 singular copy of Biggs the Explorer. It can once again only fetch spells from there, but it can lead to having more creatures in hand as well if you take something like Zombie Carnival or Energy Stream. In general, being able to charge your one-off late game spells early on and knowing that they're not gonna be there forever is very reassuring and is definitely something the deck needs. The original list from Auto also played 1 copy of Ghastly Drain, and I think it's definitely a valuable card that can win games against controls, but since this deck doesn't have any reliable shield generation, I felt like it's just a bit too risky and I wanted to make room for some other inclusions, but feel free to run it in your own list if you so desire. And that's it, that's the deck. It's a very unusual one for sure, you don't see a lot of it in the meta landscape, but I think it's definitely a fun one and it can catch a lot of people by surprise. I hope you enjoyed this deck profile, there are definitely more to come, so make sure to stay tuned. Until next time duelists, take care.